Hey there! Today we're unraveling a tale that's as haunting as a saxophone's wail and as intriguing as a gumbo recipe passed down through generations. That's right, we're diving headfirst into the lore of the captivating Casket Girls. Beneath the moon's embrace and the swaying Spanish moss, the legend of the Casket Girls echoes through the bayous and Bourbon Street alike. But you know me, I've got my detective hat on, ready to separate historical fact from ghostly fiction. So pull up a chair, let's journey into the heart of the Big Easy's most chilling mystery. Our story begins with the words of Marita Woowood Cradle. According to her book, New Orleans Vampires, History and Legend, in the year 1727, a brave group of French maidens set sail for the New World under the vigilant gaze of the Ursuline Nuns. Their mission? To become brides to Louisiana's pioneers. But oh, they carried more than just trousseaux in their caskets. An eerie name well earned. As the ship cut through the tumultuous waves, darkness cast a sinister shadow. The tale reveals a lurking evil, vampires, cunning and malevolent, feasting on the vulnerable souls weakened by illness. It was a supernatural showdown of epic proportions. In the supernatural clash, the Ursuline nuns emerged as fearless defenders, armed with their unshakable faith. Fangs clashed with crosses, and the maidens were shielded from the ravenous undead by the power of belief itself. And so our Casket Girls landed on the shores of the French Quarter, seeking refuge in the shadow of the Ursuline Convent. Those very attic windows, sealed tight, stand as a silent testament to this spectral saga. But hey, let's ease up on the suspense for a moment and stroll into the realm of historical fact. You see, legends often sprinkle truth amidst the tales. The Casket Girls? Oh, they were real, alright. Courageous souls who voyaged from France to the burgeoning Louisiana colony. Our story is anchored in the Ursuline Convent, a living relic that reminds us how history and mystery intertwine. The stubbornly sealed windows? Yep, they're not just props for a chilling narrative. They're a tangible link to the past that's as foggy as the Mississippi on a misty morning. Ah, the French language, a delicate dance of words that's about to become a comedic stumble on my part. Brace yourselves as I try to pronounce the unpronounceable. So gather your courage and join me as I peel back the layers of legend and lore. Stick around to the end, because I've got a bonus that'll be worth the wait. So we've established that the Casket Girls were real people and they really were shipped from France to Louisiana. You might be wondering, did New Orleans already have its share of women? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, back in the 18th century, the Louisiana colony had a bit of a population problem. The male settlers were mostly adventurers and fur traders, and the colony's leaders had a grand plan. They wanted to transform these brave souls into planters, farmers, tradesmen, and shopkeepers, the backbone of a thriving community. But here's the twist. They believed that women held the key to stability. The idea was to introduce women into the colony as a stabilizing force. The plan was for French male colonists to marry indigenous women, teaching them the ways of French society. You might think everything went as planned, but history loves a good plot twist. Instead of molding their new wives into proper French ladies, some of the men started adopting the laid-back culture of their indigenous partners. So the colony's fathers had to go back to the drawing board. They reached out to the French government for help and drew inspiration from a successful program in New France, modern-day Quebec, where the king sponsored marriageable women known as filles de roi, or daughters of the king. Here's where it gets interesting. While Louisiana didn't have the same program as New France, it had its own unique plan. The women sent to Louisiana were from some of the roughest parts of Paris and the surrounding areas. You might wonder why the drastic difference. Well, Louisiana was used as a makeshift female penal colony, and New Orleans had become a den of criminals and degenerates. Not to mention, the Louisiana program was overseen by John Law's Western Company, and let's say they weren't as selective as their counterparts for the New France program. In fact, there's a dark twist to this tale. The women sent to Louisiana were often kidnapped from vulnerable situations, a far cry from the sponsorship and dowries enjoyed by the filles de roi. Between 1704 and 1721, there were 5 shipments of women to Louisiana, with varying degrees stories of success. Their journey wasn't easy. Many of these women faced malnutrition, disease, and hardships during their voyage and shortly after their arrival. But this is where the Casket Girls come into play. The Casket Girls were the last of these shipments, and despite the challenges, this initiative was a remarkable success. These women played a pivotal role in creating cultural and population hubs in places like New Orleans, Biloxi, and Mobile. They brought stability, enticed their husbands out of the wilderness, and helped these towns flourish. It's incredible how a group of determined young women could make such a lasting impact on the history of a place. Alright, we've got the scoop on why the Casket Girls embarked on their journey to Louisiana. So you might be thinking, who were these Casket Girls? Were they just random girls plucked off the streets? Well, not quite. These young women were handpicked from a rather unexpected place, La Sepulture, which was a hospital of sorts in 18th century Paris. It wasn't your typical hospital scene. Imagine this, La Sepulture housed a mix of female orphans, prostitutes, the homeless, and yes, even convicted criminals. Yep, you heard me right. Convicted criminals. It even had a section known as La Force, a prison that was equally notorious and cruel. The Casket Girls weren't just randomly chosen, they were carefully selected from the orphans of this intriguing mix. These girls were chosen for their unique qualities. They were a hand-picked group of about 24 young women, aged 14 to 17, known as Filles du Casket, or girls of suitcases. These young ladies were chosen based on their virginity and character, qualities highly valued in the marriage market of Louisiana at the time. Each of them was given a cassette, later casket, a small trunk holding their trousseau, hence the name Casket Girls. It wasn't until the 19th century that casket was another term for coffin. But the story doesn't end there. The Casket Girls weren't left to their own devices on this journey. They had chaperones from La Sepulture, including Gertrude and 2 other nuns, to ensure their safety during the voyage and to help facilitate their marriages upon their arrival. Now here's a plot twist that might surprise you. The Casket Girls didn't actually land directly in New Orleans. Nope, they made their grand entrance in Biloxi, modern-day Mississippi. It wasn't quite the glamorous arrival you might expect. Upon landing, these young ladies were placed in temporary accommodations, probably warehouses, where they were made available for potential suitors. Talk about a unique way of matchmaking, right? Here's where it gets juicy. These girls weren't exactly conforming to the meek and modest standards of 18th century society. They were survivors of a harsh environment, products of their time at La Sepulture. Governor Benville himself praised their purity and piety, but didn't shy away from lamenting their undisciplined and sometimes uncontrollable behavior. Now, looking at this from a 21st century perspective, it's not surprising that these girls didn't fit the mold. They were tough, resilient, and raised in a brutal environment. Survival requires strength, not meekness. Let's take a few steps back and talk about the Casket Girls' voyage to Louisiana from France. Let me paint a picture. It's 1721 and transatlantic travel is a far cry from our comfy flights. Imagine spending months on a ship, battling meager rations, pitch black nights without candles, and the constant threat of pirates. Sounds like a scene from a swashbuckling adventure, right? The Casket Girls weren't alone on this treacherous journey. Alongside their chaperones, they shared the ship with about 60 other women and girls from La Sepulture. Now here's where the story takes an unexpected twist. These women were prisoners and prostitutes from La Force, headed to a different fate in Louisiana. No chaperones, no trousseaux, just uncertainty. The ship carrying these brave souls was the French sloop La Baleine, a cargo vessel that braved the vast Atlantic. Departing from Nantes, the conditions on this ship were nothing short of grim. Imagine cramped, dark and damp quarters with no privacy, and here's the kicker. No candles or lanterns allowed at night due to fire hazards. Talk about navigating through the darkness, both literally and figuratively. Now let's talk about rations. Meals consisted of meager portions of biscuits, vegetables, soups, and cod or salted meats for dinner. Not exactly a gourmet experience, right? The lack of vitamins combined with these tiny rations often led to illness and starvation, making this journey a true test of resilience. The chaperone girls from La Baleine earned a special nickname, the Baleine Brides. They weren't just random travelers, they were closely monitored and basically ensured to be virgins. But hold on, there's another twist to this tale. Sister Gertrude, their chaperone, didn't exactly win any popularity contest. Historical documents paint her as a somewhat sour and capricious figure, and her antics cost her the respect of the girls themselves. Now here's a real-life plot twist. After reaching Biloxi, Sister Gertrude was sent packing just 3 months after their arrival. Governor Benneville himself expressed his disappointment, noting her less than ideal behavior. It's incredible to think about the challenges these women faced during their voyage, from the uncertainty of their futures to the harsh conditions on board. This wasn't just a leisurely cruise, it was a grueling test of strength and determination. So when you hear about the Casket Girls' journey, remember it was a far cry from the romanticized tales we might envision. These brave souls endured hardships, uncertainties, and a reality that's more complex than fiction. You might be wondering, how on earth did the Casket Girls end up tangled in the web of vampire lore? Well, let's travel back to the 19th century, a time when the world was sinking its teeth into the enchanting realm of vampire stories. Imagine authors like John Podhoretty and Bram Stoker weaving tales of immortal creatures with an insatiable thirst for blood. This literary trend created the perfect storm of vampire hysteria sweeping society. It's like they opened the door to a world where reality and fiction danced a tantalizing tango. As the legend of the Casket Girls spread, elements from these captivating vampire narratives began to intertwine with their story. Picture this: young women arriving in New Orleans with mysterious casket-like chests. And here's the kicker: the resemblance between the chest and traditional coffins ignited the imagination of those who heard the tale. It was a spark waiting to ignite, a mystery waiting to unravel. And here's where it gets even spookier: the Casket Girls' nocturnal arrival, cloaked in a veil of darkness, mirrors the legends of vampires who often emerged as creatures of the night. It's as if reality and fiction did a little dance, blurring the lines between the two. But wait, there's more to this story than meets the eye. Picture the colonial era, where superstitions and supernatural beliefs ran rampant. Folklore was the thread weaving the fabric of life and death. Imagine the Casket Girls arriving in a foreign land with customs and practices that stood out like a beacon. It's like they walked out of a mysterious tale and into reality. Their uniqueness might have been twisted or exaggerated in local stories, adding a touch of mystique to their aura. Now let's talk about the enchanting backdrop of New Orleans. This melting pot of cultures, voodoo, and spiritual traditions set the stage for myths and legends to intertwine. The city's diverse history became fertile ground for blending different narratives, including vampires and the Casket Girls. The link between the Casket Girls and vampires underscores the incredible power of storytelling and how it weaves fact and fiction into a tapestry of mystery and allure. It's a testament to how human fascination with the supernatural can transform historical events into timeless tales. So as we uncover the layers of this intriguing connection, remember that history often intertwines with imagination, leaving us a legacy of stories that are as mysterious as they are captivating. Are you scratching your head wondering, where do these Ursuline nuns fit into the Casket Girls story? Are they just another piece of the puzzle? Well, not quite. Because these nuns are very much real, and their journey is a remarkable thread woven into this mysterious tapestry. Let's travel back to 1727, a time when 12 courageous Ursuline nuns embarked on a voyage from France to New Orleans. Their mission? To open a convent that would cater to the sick and educate young women from all walks of life. Picture a 3-month voyage turned into a challenging 5-month odyssey across treacherous seas. These nuns were made of stern stuff, ready to serve the city's sick and educate the minds of the future. But hold on, the convent was still under construction upon their arrival. So these dedicated nuns found themselves temporarily housed in one of the grander homes in the French Quarter. Talk about diving into the heart of the city. Let's clear the cobwebs of misconceptions. No, these nuns weren't wielding supernatural powers or summoning spirits. They were here for a noble cause, to provide care and education to the people of New Orleans. The Ursuline nuns weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Nope, they were already hard at work teaching young girls and shaping minds. The convent was more than a building, it was a beacon of learning in a young city. Fast forward to 1734 and the Ursuline nuns had a stunning new home, the first Ursuline convent at 1100 Ursuline Street. The nuns celebrated their new abode with a confident procession through the heart of the city, a bold move that showcased their role as community pillars. The first convent had its quirks, but hey, every structure has a tale to tell. And here's the kicker, a newer, even more charming two-story structure with an attic was completed in 1752. This architectural gem survived some of the fiercest fires in French Quarter history. It's a true survivor. Now, let's talk about that attic, a space shrouded in intrigue. Picture 6 bed chambers and a corridor, all with a story to tell. And then there's that one room with a brick floor, a place where the nuns cared for those grappling with mental illness. The floor's design wasn't just for aesthetics, it was all about practicality and cleanliness. As time rolled on, the attic gained its own reputation, with stories of shutters flung open by storms and eerie faces glimpsed in the windows. It's a place where the past seems to linger and the nuns' legacy lives on. The tale of the Ursuline nuns is an integral part of the Casket Girls' story. Remember, history isn't just about dusty facts, it's about the people who lived it, the buildings they inhabited, and the mysteries that continue to captivate us. So we've journeyed through time, explored the mythical tales, and dived deep into the historical facts. But let's set the record straight and connect the dots between the legend and the reality of the Casket Girls. The Casket Girls set foot in Biloxi in 1721, a solid 6 years before the Ursuline nuns graced New Orleans with their presence. Yet these were two separate tales unfolding on parallel tracks. The famous convent, whispered to be the girls' dwelling, didn't even exist until 1752, a whole 3 decades after the Casket Girls were already settled into their married lives. Ah, the whispers of a penal colony. They're true. New Orleans was indeed a melting pot of criminals and outcasts, a makeshift penal colony for the French government. The city's origins are shrouded in intriguing secrets, but that's a story for another day. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather the casket in the room. The girls weren't lugging around coffin-like trunks. No, no, no. The term casket or cassette here is just a fancy word for suitcase. Over time, language twists and turns, and casket simply means a small trunk. Coffin? Well, that only gained popularity in the 19th century, and even today, it's mainly a term used in the United States. Hold on to your imagination for this. Those trunks the Casket Girls carried, they were more like overnight bags. Not exactly spacious enough for a whole human body. So, the idea of them hauling around coffins? Let's toss that notion out the window. The treacherous transatlantic journey and the specter of illness, a tale as old as time. But here's the kicker, sickness sweeping through the voyage and New Orleans was par for the course. Blame it on the city's swampy setting, subtropical climate, and a lack of proper nutrition. It wasn't a strange phenomenon, it was a grim reality of the era. Now, things get eerie. The Ursuline convent's sealed shutters are like a riddle begging to be solved. Old buildings usually let their attic shutters breathe, but not this one. Storms roll in, those shutters pop open like clockwork, only to be swiftly closed again. People have sworn they've spotted faces in those attic windows, and some even claim to feel unseen eyes watching the bustling world below. So there you have it, the legend of the Casket Girls, intricately woven with history, myths, and tales. We've unraveled the threads, peeled back the layers, and exposed the truth beneath the mystique. If you've journeyed with me this far, congratulations, you've unlocked an exclusive bonus, a hauntingly rewritten legend by Marita Cradle that casts a new light on the captivating Casket Girls. Before we unravel this new tale, don't forget to type vampire in the comments below without context, to make others wonder and let me know you stuck around till the end. Now let the eerie legend unfold. The year was 1721, the time in New Orleans' infancy. A great need for marriageable women to help colonize Louisiana was burdening the governing forces. Thus, 24 girls were selected from a hospital in France, Le Sepulchre, a boarding facility with a suspicious reputation. It was a home for orphans, prisoners, and the mentally insane. Between 14 and 17 years of age, the girls who were chosen had been raised, many from birth, in the walls of Le Sepulchre. While it was not at their discretion whether they would stay in France or embark on the journey to New Orleans, heading towards a questionable future, one might think the chance for any adventure out of the walls of Le Sepulchre would have been a welcome one. Uncertain of their fate, the girls were put under the chaperonage of Sister Gertrude, also of Le Sepulchre. She was said to have ruled with an erratic nature. Her charge was to keep the girls safe on the ship and behind lock and key during evening hours, so they would not be deflowered. Le Sepulchre was a dark, gruesome place where historically not just orphans, the mentally ill, and the insane were housed, but also diabolical creatures were rumored to have been held captive there when necessary. In addition to ensuring the Casket girls had safe passage, the sister, a creature of sorts herself, was to dispose of, while at sea, a very dangerous passenger. The girls traveled with large trousseaux, also referred to as caskets at the time. Sister Gertrude traveled with a casket of her own, you see. It was the casket of one very dangerous vampire. Benneville writes of a trick Sister Gertrude, the girl's chaperone, played during the voyage. The sister was clearly jealous of the young maidens and the attention they received, adored by all they met. The sister might have released the creature in the girls' locked chambers on one evening at sea. Perhaps the sister made a pact with the vampire whom she was supposed to dispose of. It was rumored that one girl said just before she went dizzy at night that she had seen a small black cat in their chambers. Just thereafter, she was visited by a dark figure who seemed to entrance her, and then mysteriously she went faint. The girls were all reported to be weak from poor nutrition, but could their weakness have come from the first bite of the vampire? Perhaps night after night they were being visited by the creature who was slowly turning these girls into prisoners of darkness at Sister Gertrude's direction. Meanwhile, the girls were kept under lock and key at night. During the day, when others roamed the deck, the girls were now nowhere to be seen. However, the dark sealed quarters of the ship certainly made it possible for nocturnal creatures to be quite safe during daylight hours. Many passengers were hit by illness during the journey, some actually dying. While not thought of unusual at the time, many now question whether those passengers weren't fated at the hands of something sinister. Could they have been nourishment for the vampire and the maidens who were now under its spell? Sister Gertrude was chagrined as these girls seemed to become more and more beautiful during the voyage. Once they reached Louisiana, Sister Gertrude was the sole witness as each girl was quickly wed, all by night. However, she was then shipped immediately back to France, quite in her favor as she avoided any consequences of her actions. It is said that there is no record of these girls ever having made it to New Orleans. However, over the years, there was much illness in the city of New Orleans during these times, and that is the primary reason the Ursuline nuns were sent to the city. It is very likely that once the girls accepted their new existence, they made their way to this city known for its sinister side. It was perfect for a creature of the night. They could feast on the prisoners, prostitutes, and vagrants, as who would be missing them? Sister Mary Hatchard, the youngest of the Ursulines, wrote 5 long letters to her father during her travels to New Orleans, in one of which she makes a point of mentioning a small cat. She wrote, "We also took a pretty little cat that wanted to be a part of our community, taking for granted that it could find little mice and rats in Louisiana just as in France." Well, it is rumored that the king found out about Sister Gertrude's shenanigans during the voyage to Louisiana and now feared for the safety of the people of Louisiana at the hands of the vampire maidens. However, it was agreed that it was no fault of the girls themselves what they had become, so the order was made that Sister Gertrude would sail with the Ursulines undercover. Sister Gertrude was never seen on the ship La Baleine. There was only a small pretty cat. Sister Gertrude had been given a little rope, but had greatly taken advantage of the freedom the king had afforded her. Now found out, perhaps her punishment was not to scurry for little mice and rats, but sent to the Ursulines in cat form. The sister was made to travel back to New Orleans and one by one find and capture the Casket girls. She was to bring them under the care of the nuns until the convent was built, and there they would be housed under lock and key for eternity, under Sister Gertrude's eternal observation. It was, after all, at her hand that the horror of the girls' fate had transpired. The Casket girls would indeed remain in the convent under Sister Gertrude's perpetual patrol. However, the girls would also receive the care of the Ursulines. They would be educated, given love, and spiritually nurtured to recapture whatever humanity they were capable of in their current situation. The nuns were driven to help women of all types, and certainly those who had been the victims of a cruel, immoral, and immortal joke. The Ursulines were made privy to the vampire maidens once they arrived in New Orleans. The girls were brought brought one by one to the house on Benville Street. Sister Gertrude anxiously awaited the convent's security and convenience to its hospital. She was currently forced to hunt daily around town, directing rats to the maidens to feast on for blood that was the necessity for their survival. Finally, the time came in 1735 when the first convent was built. It was decided that the cloistered nuns, rather than travel quickly in buggies to the convent with caskets in tow, would make a statement of their presence in New Orleans with a procession from the Benville house to the convent. Their procession, with music and costumes, would drive attention away from the several caskets they traveled with behind the parade, concealed under a canopy. The vampires were held captive on the third floor and fed the blood of the ill, which worked for their circumstances. Later, when the convent was rebuilt in 1752, they were only afforded an attic. Some of them had attempted on more than one occasion to escape, so it was decided an attic could be kept more secure. In addition, a special room was built for the protection of the nuns, where the vampires could be punished in seclusion when necessary, until they were once again brought to reason. It is said that occasionally one of the girls would go mad to the cloister, which was their eternal prison. The nuns were then forced to secure the vampire in this room. It is the only room in the attic with a brick floor, and heavy chains are secured to the beams. There was a double door so that the nuns were not forced to enter the room, but could simply toss rats in for the girls to feed on. There in the third floor attic they stay under the protection of the church and the archdiocese. Many say that when they wander past the convent at night, they feel eyes peering deep into their souls. These are the eyes of the maidens who were robbed of their humanity and then their freedom at the hands of one sour spinster, Sister Gertrude. Centuries of anger, desire, confusion, and sadness held captive in one attic. A small cat is said to be seen now and then roaming the convent grounds. Sister Gertrude's curse remains as guardian of the Casket girls. What do you think of this revamped version of the legend? Let's see if we can get this version to take root in New Orleans folklore by sharing this video and the legend with your friends, family, and on all your socials. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about the Casket Girls of New Orleans? Do you think the historical record does the legend justice? Let me know in the comments. If you want to learn more about the Casket Girls, be sure to check out my sources in the description below. If you're in the mood for another video, check out one of the ones popping up on the screen. As always, be safe out there. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.